And then I'll say, doing the book, what I did was basically, I went out to talk to researchers who are sort of on the front of neuroscience. And I think it's an important point to see that the front of neuroscience is also, it has changed, it has moved. Because if you go back 10, 20 years, when you would talk about, so what is happening in neuroscience, it would be about disease research. They were trying to cure Alzheimer's and figure out, you know, how to treat Parkinson's patients and schizophrenics. But now where the really brainy people are going, where all the immediate interest is in the brain science that is trying to figure out aspects of human nature. So what is religion, if you look at it from a brain perspective? What is morality? What is love, or whatever? So we are looking with the new technologies that are, of course, the imaging technologies, the scannings. We are looking at the normal brain and aspects of human nature. And that's what's really going to change the way we look at ourselves. And I think one topic that illustrates this very well is moral sense or morality, which used to be looked at as something that was completely unbiological. I mean, if you go out into the street and you ask people, so what is moral sense? What is morality? Is that something biological, or what is it? And people will say, no, I mean, that's something you learn. It's something cultural. It's something you have to train. And if you ask developmental psychologists, they will also say traditionally, yes, we are basically born without moral sense or morality. We have to learn it from our parents. So we start, you have Kohlberg, for example, a developmental psychologist, who will say that there are 6 stages of moral development. You start as a baby, and your parents will train you. They will smack you if you do something evil, and, you know, praise you if you do something well. And so you learn what is good and what is bad. Then you go to school and you're socialized, and you come out into society. You learn about sort of broader ethical topics and thoughts about ethics and universals and stuff like that. And so you graduate after 6 stages of sort of moral training, and you're a fully developed moral person. Now, biologists have started to look at moral sense from a different perspective, because what they're saying is there has to be, we don't get born as, you know, hard disks without any kind of moral program on there. There must be something biological, because there are types of moral dilemmas that seem to be answered in the same way or reacted to in the same way, no matter what culture you go to. So there are questions that you can ask in any culture, and people will basically answer the same thing with respect to, is this moral or amoral? So to a biologist, that tells them there must be something basically biological here. And so some scientists have started to talk about basically a moral gramma, a universal moral gramma that's the same everywhere, and that's basically hardwired. And one experiment that shows that kind of the grammatical rules pretty well, I think, is done by Mark Hauser, who's a scientist at Harvard. So he's done this very big experiment, and it's still ongoing, and actually everybody can participate because it's on the web, and it's called the moral sense test. And what it does is that it asks you, you go in there and you are asked to answer 50 different dilemmas, moral dilemmas. Basically, so you have to say, is this morally acceptable or is it unacceptable? And it turns out that after about 20,000 people all across the world in, you know, all the continents, different cultures, different age groups, different levels of education, everybody has answered these questions, and it seems that 9 out of 10 will answer exactly the same thing. So that goes to show that there is some kind of moral gramma that is the same. Of course, on top of that, we have cultural constructions of different societal or cultural moralities, because they do change from culture to culture. But underneath, there is something biological. And to illustrate one of those rules, and to illustrate how it's done in this moral sense test, I'll just take one of the dilemmas, which is a dilemma that every philosopher will know, because philosophers have grappled with this for a long time. Why is it that people answer these moral dilemmas the way they do? And what happens is you are asked to imagine that you're standing on a footbridge and you're looking out over a terrain with train tracks, and then you see a train coming toward you, and it's going really fast. Suddenly you realize that there are 5 people hanging out of the windows, screaming and crying for help. And it turns out that there's no driver in the train. And if the train keeps on going and goes under the bridge where you're standing, it will go into an abyss, and everybody is killed. So you want to help these people. You want to save them. And then it turns out that you can, actually, because there is a little handle that you can pull, and then you sort of sidetrack the train car, and it goes into a little sidetrack, and it stops there because there is a guy sleeping on the track. So, of course, this guy is killed because of you pulling the handle, basically. And so you're asked, is this morally acceptable or is it not? And 9 out of 10 people will answer yes. It's not just morally acceptable, it's obligatory. You have to do this. Of course you have to save 5 people at the expense of 1. It would be amoral not to save the 5. Okay, then you go on to the next scenario, which is basically the same. You are standing on the footbridge, the train is coming toward you, the 5 people are screaming and crying for help, and you want to help these people, and this time there is no sidetrack and there's no handle. But luckily, there's a very, very fat guy walking by. You can push this fat guy onto the track and he will stop the train. And he will be killed, of course. So now you're asked again, so is this morally acceptable? And, you know, to a philosopher, you would say, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, you're saving 5 people at the expense of 1. But now, 9 out of 10 people will say, this is morally unacceptable. You shouldn't do this. This is wrong. The other thing was right. And that is where, you know, something strange is going on. And Mark Hauser, as he told me, he has tried to ask people, so what is the rule that you're using here? Why are you answering like this? And he sent this question to, you know, hundreds of people and asked them. And what he said was, it's, you know, it's bullshit. People can't tell me what kind of rule they're using because they don't know, because this is the moral grammar kicking in. Now, another guy at Harvard, Josh Green, who used to be a philosopher, who's now a neuroscientist, has actually looked at, so what happens, where is this grammar sort of, where is it expressing itself? And what he did was basically put some people in an fMRI scanner, which detects your brain activity as you go in real time. And what he saw was that if you put people in a scanner, look at their brain activity, while they're answering these questions, these moral dilemmas, you see exactly where the moral grammar kicks in. Because what happens is, in the first scenario, where you find it morally acceptable to kill the 1 person on the sidetrack, is what's happening is basically a calculation. You have your frontal cortex, locations that are doing thinking and logical reasoning. It's basically thinking, okay, I'm saving 5 people at the expense of 1. That's plus 4. So, you know, it's basic math. So that's fine. The next scenario, what happens is you still have the calculation going on in the front of your brain, but this time you have a very, very heavy impulse coming from basically what you might call lower regions, more primitive regions, the limbic system, where emotions are expressed. So what you have is an emotion telling you this is wrong. No matter what you're calculating, the emotion is winning out over the calculation, over the rationality. And and this, I think, is basically what we're usually calling gut feeling. So it's coming from another place. It's coming from the amygdala, a place in the brain, an area of the brain that houses sort of, or is active when we have negative emotional impulses like fear and disgust. So these amygdala feelings are telling us this is wrong, or this is right, or whatever.